Is the world around us a metaphor for our body? It's a good question. Currently in New South Wales we're in the throes of some rather severe firestorms, and they're quite close to where I live. They're not super close, 20 kilometres away. Not that far if the wind gets behind it. So what sets up a process, and it's a very interesting parallel I think to health. You often hear of people being quite healthy and then there's a tipping point and they suddenly go downhill really fast, and sometimes they go through some sort of a scoop and there's an intervention and then they come out the other side. So if we look at the setup for the environment that led to the fires we're experiencing at the moment, was that we've had an extended dry period. So in some parts of the country it's been several years since they've had decent rain, and eventually the landscape becomes extremely dry. And then we've had sort of hot dry winds for about a month, and they very quickly dry out the landscape. And then we had some lightning, and if there were a few deliberately lit fires, because there are always some weird people that find fires somehow satisfying, and but a few were lit by, there were lightning strikes, and when the lightning hits an area of high fuel load, it's like throwing a match into a bonfire or throwing a match into some oily rags. And then of course if the wind continues and everything is continuing to dry out, and then the fires just run and jump, and it's quite frightening and it's quite tragic because a few lives have been lost and people lose their houses, etc. So what would a similarity be in a body? Because often everything's fine until it's not. And so you hear of someone, they were quite healthy and then they got a tumour and it was quite advanced and aggressive and it very quickly spread through their body. But I would say the body, rather like the landscape, the landscape wasn't healthy. There was too much load, it was too dry. There's been, there's a restriction on backburning in national parks that's considered not good for the park environment. The weather isn't always conducive to doing some controlled burn-offs. So there's a number of factors that converge over a period of time to create a situation where it's actually much more likely, if something happens, for everything to go wrong. So often we just, in terms of our body, we truck through our life doing things every day that seem to be okay, but we're setting the tissue up for a tipping point where it cannot pull back. It loses its resources and its buffers to help the body catch up and regroup. So we might have a series of things that actually all happen simultaneously to reduce the body's ability to rebalance itself. So we've got a prolonged period of high stress, which we know the DNA coils into a tight coil, so when it reproduces, it doesn't reproduce optimally in blueprint, sort of like having not enough right pieces of Lego to create the right building, so it's not right. So then you have often prolonged inflammation, which we know is a critical setting for disease state. So you've got unhealthy cells all through the body. Unhealthy cells only lead to sickness. Unhealthy cells never turn into wellness without some sort of process to allow unhealthy cells to be repaired or replaced by healthy cells. And when you get that tipping point or the trigger, you get a viral infection, you get something that then gets a runaway process that just runs through the body out of control. Might start in an organ, but depending on the nature of the organ, it can spread quite quickly to the rest of the body. So it's a bit like a wildfire. It starts in a place and then it jumps and spreads throughout the system. Other things we can do in the worldly environment to control things? Sometimes not, but sometimes there are some management strategies that we can employ that seem to reduce the damage or contain the damage. What can you do for yourself? there's a whole lot of strategies that you can do, because our bodies are much easier to manage than the environment at large. So, and it would be maybe hopeful to think that you could control one element of the environment to make everything change. So, whereas in the body, if you just reduce stress levels, that might be sufficient to change things. Drinking more water might give the body some chance to detoxify. Changing what you eat into food that's more whole, food that's better profiled to you, so not inflammatory. All those things, and if you did everything, you might be quite shocked by how you could feel better quite quickly, and you might add some clever leading edge technology supplementation that actually enhances cell health, and you could often turn the ship around midstream, which is quite remarkable. So the lesson for today is that we often can get a clue about what can be happening inside us by looking outside to the broader environment, the one we live in, because that is basically governed by the same laws of balance and symbiosis, and, if you like, environmental geography, that everything has to have some sort of feedback and balance and actually be in harmony for well-being of the environment on a micro and macro scale. So for each of us, doing an audit of where we are, observing, your sleeping quality, what's on your dinner plate, how often you eat, how often you exercise, the things that aren't rocket science that we know are critical for creating health. So I'll put a link to some resources that actually you could look at that will help you understand what components should be in place for you to help you enjoy better health and give your body a better chance to be its best at all times, so it's more resilient and isn't as likely to set off on some sort of wildfire episode when it gets some sort of trigger that it can't quite manage. Okay, it's Friday, it's going to be a great weekend, and I'm wishing you all the best for a lovely weekend wherever you are. All the best.